What is up, everybody? This is Mark. This is Will. This is Cathe. How are you, everybody? Good to see you. We just went live, so we're going to wait for a couple minutes to let everybody get in here with us. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's start like we always do, asking you guys in the chat, where are you watching from? I don't mean the room of your house. I mean, what state are you watching from? And what's your weather look like? Cathe, what's the weather look like where you are? I guess you and Will are probably pretty similar.
No, actually, we're completely different.
Oh,
very, very,
Yeah,
very
the San Francisco Bay Area has a whole ton of microclimates, and
Yeah.
Alameda has its own.
okay.
So it could be 100 out where he is, and it could be 60 at my house.
So what is it?
It's about 70.
Oh, and Will?
It was foggy this morning.
Oh, today we hit a high of 102.
Ooh,
That's pretty normal.
man.
Yeah, it's been pretty warm here. The last just couple days. We
Nice.
had a little break in the high 80s, low 90s, but the rest of this
And
week.
doesn't one of your brothers live in Daly City?
Yeah, I have one brother in Daly City where it's always cold.
Which is a whole different microclimate than mine. It's like another 5 miles across the bay. And where it's 102 where he is, it might be 65 for me. It might be 55 in Daly City.
Yeah,
Because the fog might never clear.
And my other brother lives in Oakland, probably.
Yeah, his is a
10
little
minutes from
closer
you.
to what ours is. Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll drive through your area and we'll get onto the Bay Bridge and it's sunny and it's nice and it's perfect in the 70s. And then as soon as we cross over into the Daly City area, it drops 10 degrees. It's completely foggy. You don't see the sun. It's pretty shocking. My brother wants to leave Daly City because they never get to use their backyard.
No.
And they're right off of the ocean, so the salt water just destroys their cars.
Yeah, we're only about a quarter of a mile in from the bay, so we don't really get the saltwater effect, which is nice.
Well, we don't get that in Oklahoma either. So I see. Let's say hi to some people. We got Christy. What's up, Christy Borman? Marcia, you are in Florida. I don't know what part of Florida you're in. I don't remember, but you said it's warm there. Christy's in sunny Washington. Got Wendy from Wisconsin. Rain for 5 minutes and sun is shining for 10. Yep. Paulette Sharp, how are you? Good to see you. Catherine Anderson, what is up, my friend?
Yeah, she's between Cathe and myself. She's
okay
in the Sassoon/Fairfield area, so she's pretty much right in between where Cathe and myself are.
It's always good to see Deborah with us. It's good to see you, my friend. I'm glad you're here from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Oh, I love Albuquerque. I grew up in Santa Fe.
Nice. Ricky from Wisconsin also. Catherine, you said you remember living in Daly City. Happiest day when you moved to San Bruno.
And that's a 5-minute drive.
Yeah.
Tops, and the weather is just completely different.
Oh yeah, Paulette's in Texas. That's right. It's a mite warm. I bet it's right now. It's where I'm at. It's 96. Feels like 100. Not bad for 8 o'clock at night. Gross.
Yeah, I'm at.
What's the humidity like where you
99
are?
It's not horrible right now. It's a little bit sticky, not too bad. Hey, I'm missing some. Diane Potter, how are you? Katie Boley, how are you? Good to see you. Wendy from Knoxville, Tennessee. Hey, Brian Easley. Hey, what's up, my brother? Good to see you. Facebook user, I don't know who this is. Hi, Las Vegas. Good to see you. Renee Monty, how are you, my friend? I just talked with you earlier today. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're with us. Oh, Brian's in Tennessee, right?
I see a Facebook user from Sacramento, so they're here with me, understanding the heat.
Oh, that's not you logged in as another account?
No,
okay.
I can't type.
Not today.
Terry Krusner in Oregon Coast. Very nice. And Will, why don't you catch a few of those so I'm not doing all the talking? Michelle there from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I see Tim. Tim's from Dixon, which is, about 20 minutes from us here in Sacramento. So they're still pretty warm over there. Ooh, Toronto. I see a Toronto, Canada. Music Chick Art.
Nice. Oh, I have to say hi to Sue Roycraft because she's in Minneapolis where my wife is right now. So I'll tell my wife Angie to go and say hi to Sue up there in the Twin Cities.
Oh, I see a Facebook. I see it's Kelly. Hey Kelly, how are you from Las Vegas? It's just 109 there today.
Oh,
Ooh.
gross.
Yeah, Vancouver. I see Marie. Hey Marie from Vancouver. I have a lot of family in Vancouver. One of my favorite cities to visit.
Catherine asked, "Are you still in your daughter's room?" The answer is yes.
Yes. Yes. The plan is to be at the shop, but had family stuff to take care of. So I try to take care of all the shop stuff early and
But
get
at least
that.
you're representing on the shirt there.
Yeah, from Catherine. Catherine Anderson actually made the shirt.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's
nice.
cool. That is sparkly.
That is.
I know. It's blingy,
I like it.
you know.
That's cool.
Now, is she
Just
going to
starts
turn
to
it
walk
into a tube top? Make you a tube top one as well?
I think so. I think I have to. I think that I'll save that for the conference. The photos don't do me justice, so it has to be in person.
Well, I have some photos. Wait, never mind.
Yeah, no, don't go there.
Hey, Marilyn Lacey, good to see you there. I'm glad you're here. Marie from Vancouver. Elizabeth, what is up from Los Angeles? Very nice. Brian, whatever will you like playing with dolls? Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
I do. This is I just say that this is my daughter's room, but this is actually my man cave. So it's it used to be this is where my lasers used to be. This used to be my where the Glowforge was originally. I had all the Glowforges set up in here, and this was my laser room, and then moved it out so that my daughter could have her own room, and got the warehouse space now. So
Nice.
I have all the Glowforges set up there, and the mirror, and
Whatever else you snag driving down the street.
Yeah,
Right.
pretty much, the fiber laser, the Galvo, all the ones that just sit there right now, as of now. It's just boxes on top of boxes.
That's kind of your life, though. Pretty much.
It is. And it's nice to have some room to be able to grow. But, here in the next month or so, it's going to feel like my garage again here, I think, in the next couple months. Because, I don't know if everyone knew. I know I mentioned it in some of the groups, but for the holiday season, I have 30,000 cutting boards coming. So
0,000.
Yeah, that's a lot of cutting boards. I've never.
And that's not the only product you have.
No. So that's just the ones that take up the most space. So that's going to be a lot of fun to
How many crates is that going to be?
Well, one of the orders that I got from one of my suppliers, it was like one of my smaller orders of, I think, 1,200 boards. It was 9 pallets.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So,
it's going to take up the warehouse.
Wow.
Yeah. So if 12,
Why that forklift?
The warehouse next to me has a forklift, and they're going to let me use it. They'll help me unload the trucks to get them into the warehouse. So
That's great.
So yeah, if 1,200 took 9 pallets, I can imagine what 30,000 will look like.
Man, Will, if you tell me that you sell out in 4 hours, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, no. The goal is to be able to have stock for everyone through the holidays, right?
Woo.
So they buy 5 or 6 that they like, and they sell it, and it goes well for them. They know they can come back and get the same boards.
And get more.
Well, I think Brian kind of says it for all of us.
Jeez.
I totally agree, Brian. Well said. And Katie, she said, we desire acacia rounds for signs. So how many you got coming of those, Will?
Well, I have acacia boards, round ones. I don't have, not so much non-cutting board ones.
Yeah.
Katie sent me a message about that too. So
okay.
I'm looking into that, but definitely something to consider.
So you're saying she's being a squeaky wheel is what you're saying?
Yes. And they need to be, because I get, bombarded with messages.
Or
every
I have
day.
to say, Facebook user kind of said it right as well. Sweet baby Jesus. That is a lot of cutting boards.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think I'll have like 15 different styles for the holidays this year.
Man, you better organize the living crap out of those stacks.
I know, because right now it's still so fun. My kids come over every few days, and we have Nerf gun wars,
Yeah.
and they use it as bunkers and things.
Yeah.
Like
See, we
that.
can put. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we move things around, but with 30,000 in there, I would be afraid that it would fall on them.
I was gonna say, can I bring my paintball gear and we can have a little speedball there
There you
at
go.
night after the conference? Yeah.
Yeah. I think Cathe's game. She strikes me as a paintballer, so
Yeah.
It could be
I'm,
fun.
I'm
could
calling
be.
her to help organize all these boxes. So
All right. Well, we've talked enough here. I want to say hi to a couple more people. Abby, hi from Wisco, Wisconsin. Christy Dotson, good to see you.
the Smoky Hill family.
Smoky Hill family, very nice. Good to have everybody here. You guys, Michael Horton in the house. Nerf guns, very nice. You guys are going to love today. We're going to talk to Cathe Ray today. If you got, I don't know if anybody, by show of hands, there's no way to, by show of hands in the chat, how many of you guys have run into Cathe somewhere in one of the groups? Give me a wave if you have talked to Cathe at some point or other. Yes, one of the hardest working people in the laser world. Abso-freaking-lutely.
Okay.
Yep, she does a great job. I'm a little bit starstruck just to do this with her, but this is great. I will tell you before we get started here, I told Cathe earlier today, so many things I love about her. One of the things is that she answers a lot of people with really great answers, really concise answers, and she beats me to a whole bunch of questions. I used to be able to get out there. Yeah, right. But it really is fun. Those of us who've been around a little bit, we get to see
I always sent the curve questions to you.
Right.
Yeah,
that's true.
She's great at making sure she directs the right people to the right.
King of curve.
That's true. But I love it. Okay. Well, tell you what, let's just jump in. The first thing we want to do is just make sure that everybody knows who Cathe is. I'll let Will kind of jump this off here a little bit, kind of help introduce Cathe, talk about maybe where we met her at, how she got started with her laser journey, and then we'll get into some more specific questions for her. So I'm going to throw the ball to you, Will.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for coming on. We appreciate it. We've had great conversations, and when we talk about, the people who are some of the most helpful in the community and have some of the best information out there that I've learned a lot from as well, and I know other users have, it's you. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of how long you've had lasers and how long you've been part of the Glowforge community. And
so I ordered my Glowforge 3 years ago, kind of end of August 3 years ago. And I had originally thought about buying one when they were doing their crowdfunding campaign. And that was the year I had been burned by, I think, 4 Kickstarter campaigns not reaching fruition. And I looked at it and I thought, that looks really cool. I'd love to have one, but there's no way in hell they're going to meet their target dates. And they were off by close to 2 years.
Yes, yeah. I know. I was one of them.
And I had forgotten kind of about them by that point. And I ran across them again with someone that I follow doing paper crafts because, I do everything. And he'd just gotten one and I thought, oh, they're finally shipping. And so the light bulb, okay, not a light bulb, like a whole string of Christmas lights went off in my head. Like, oh, I could do this. I could do that. Oh, I wonder if I could do this. And so I called a friend of mine who's also a needlework designer because my day job is I own a retail needlework store. And we started talking about things to do with it. And she's like, yeah, you should buy it. So I did. And that was kind of what started the journey. Cool. It was in the garage for a couple of years until I leased a space next door to my retail needlework shop because my Mira 7 was coming and I decided I really didn't want to put it in the garage. And now there's, I'm not there today. At some point I'll take another picture and show people. So I have the Glowforge is at home. It's in the garage. It came back home a few months ago. I have an Eon Mira 7. I have a Thunder Odin 32, which is an RF tube laser. It's a different kind than what most of us have. I have a Gleeky Cloud Pro. I know Michael Horton just got his. I bought that mostly to test. And then I've got a 20-watt fiber laser, a 3D printer, a sublimation printer, and a heat press, a big-ass heat press. So it's kind of like I jump into stuff.
That's all?
I'm all in. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. That's all.
Lame.
But I used to be a software engineer. So, doing and I never designed hardware, but I played with hardware a lot. So I just kind of get intrigued by technology and creativeness. And for me, lasering, designing, doing all of it is what started as a hobby, but the one job I've had that satisfies both my left brain and my right brain at the same time. Not at separate times, literally at the same time.
I love it.
And you have an impressive library behind you that's real.
I do. Yes. This is not a backdrop. This is an actual library. Yeah. Along with it's filled with probably about 80% of it's probably mystery books. My husband and I are both mystery fans. In my personal life, I own murder.com because my husband, I like that, Mark, because my husband and I are huge murder mystery fans. But, there's kind of a smattering of other stuff, but that's kind of the bulk of it. And then, of course, there's, you can see the bear behind me, but
I do.
Kind of a random smattering of stuffed bears because I collected them for a number of years.
I love it. That's
Nice.
cool. So refresh my memory. You got your Glowforge. That was your first laser, right?
Correct.
And that was 2 years ago?
3.
3
years ago.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. And so is that when you jumped into Facebook groups at that time?
Yeah, because I had a Facebook account because I had one for my needlework store, but I never really used Facebook. It was just not a daily thing. And now it's like I'm in, I think, I don't know, I've lost track.
A lot.
Between needlework groups and laser groups and sublimation groups, I think I'm in 50 or 60.
Yeah.
I'm in several laser groups that are brand specific because even if I don't own that laser, I kind of like to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I looked at buying a Trotec, which I didn't end up buying, but I'm still in the Trotec group because they bring up stuff about RF tube lasers that I go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if that applies to my Thunder kind of thing. And, a lot of the questions, no matter what group you're in, a lot of the questions are very similar. Yeah. Like, this didn't work. What do I do? Right. Where do I start with this? Where do I find this? There's always a lot of where do I find some supply or something or other. So. Right. But yeah, I just kind of jumped in and then went, oh, this is kind of fun. I kind of like this.
Well, that's a pretty great segue because I want to let everybody know, if you don't know, Cathe is one of the instructors at our conference that's coming up here in August. And we're still kicking around actual titles. But essentially, one of the things we talked about this afternoon was she's going to be talking about the importance of testing. And I came up with a subtitle of, why can't I just have fun cutting instead? Right. and I think I will tell you guys, if you are coming to the conference, of course, you'll be able to take her class. There's no question. We're going to make sure that everybody can take all of them, but don't miss hers because just from our conversation earlier today, and then I know tonight, it's going to be packed full of stuff that's really going to help you a lot. So why don't we jump into this conversation in this way? I'm a new laser owner. I've got some material in front of me and I have a design ready to cut. What are some steps that I could or should take before I just start hitting the button and cutting to make sure that I have the best possible results with this material? Let's kind of jump in there.
Okay. So I always like to test new materials. So even when I first got my Glowforge, I did cut the Gift of Good Measure.
Yeah.
I did the first 3 projects that it said to do. And I thought, okay, that's kind of cool. And then I had some other materials. I had a little bit of the proof grade stuff that came with my laser, but I live near Tap Plastics. So I'd gone and picked up some other acrylic and things and thought, okay, well, what can I do with this? And so for me, as a new person, testing my material, and it is still today, one of the most important things. So I use 3 different shapes to test. I have 2 of them with me. I use a scallop. So this has a scalloped edge. I use a square. This is wood, but you get the idea, just a rectangle. And then I use a circle. So and it doesn't really matter how big the circle is. It's more about the shape. And the reason I use those 3 is when you're cutting, in particular on a circle, you're using the X and the Y axis at the same time. The laser's not going this way and then down, it's going this way. So it's using both motors and both belt mechanisms. With a square, it's going either this way or this way, and it's also the fastest way it goes. And then if you're using a scallop, it's kind of a combination of on the edges, you've got the X and the Y, but then you also have to deal with this interior part, because getting the setting right for the interior part is really important, because with a lot of acrylic in particular, you can get burn marks in the interior because it spends a little bit longer there before it changes direction. So I just started out testing stuff, and the way I do it is so you see I have these little rings.
Yeah.
I bought like a, I don't know, 500 pack of them off of Amazon, and I use them for a whole bunch of things. And so in my test file with the shapes, I have a hole that will fit on the ring. I actually write on my materials.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily just writing the in the notes, because I write notes as well. So this was a test for my Mira 7. So C is cut. So speed of 18, power of 75 for max, 60 for min. E is the engrave, which is on the other side. It means dawn was on the surface, and I put 4 sheets of unprinted newspaper underneath.
Nice.
So this is the engraved side.
So, hey, back for some people who don't have who have a Glowforge, they may not know what you mean when you said min and max. Could you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah. So for industrial lasers, and even something like a Gwiki machine, because they use light burn. Every laser has a min power and a max power. Glowforge hides that, because they build that into the algorithm that they use when you send the job to the Glowforge servers, and it goes off and thinks and says, yeah, it's gonna take this long, and you press start. It's calculated the path it needs to take. It's calculated the speed that it's going to go to based on what your settings are, but it's always going to have some fluctuation when you get to corners and when you get to curves, because it's always going to go slower there. The laser physically cannot move faster this direction than it moves this way or this way. And it's usually fastest on the horizontal axis, which is why if you're engraving on a Glowforge, pretty much any laser, you want your head moving that way for the optimal path. If you've got a big engrave, that's why you stick it on the horizontal axis. So on industrial lasers that have software like, for example, Lightburn, you can control the minimum and the maximum power. Glowforge just happens to hide that. And that affects how much time it ends up spending when it hits things like interior corners or the edge of a corner. So on a industrial laser, if your minimum power is set too low, you might not get it to cut in the corner, because that's where it's going to change the speed. Glowforge, that almost never happens, because they've built it all into the algorithm, and it's usually pretty good. You don't see the same kinds of overburn or underburn in corners like you do on industrial lasers, because they've got whatever magic built into the software at their end.
Well, and they don't let us fart around with it, right?
No, they don't. They
Right.
don't. Which on some level is okay, because it does mean that there's less for you to have to know when you're jumping into this.
Right.
But at some point, if you want to have more control of it, you can't. There's just not even an option for that. So that's why on a Glowforge in particular, playing with the power and the speed settings becomes even more critical than it does on an industrial laser, because you only have those things to play with. Well, you still have focus, but that's a different thing. And you've got this additional thing of minimum power on an industrial laser. So the testing is a little different. I mean, it's not like it's substantially different, but there's a little bit more adjustments on an industrial laser.
Well, and people ask me a lot when they ask me about kerf when it comes to going around curves. And this is something
and it's different.
Right. And I tell them I cannot give them a straight answer, because if they change their min or their max or whatever they're using, it's going to change. Now, is it going to change a lot? Probably not, but it could, depending on how slow they're going around a curve and what material they're cutting. So I don't know if you have a better answer, and I'll defer to you.
Well, I mean, it's all about speed and power and burn.
Right.
So because a laser is burning with light.
Yeah.
So I mean, effectively, it's fire, but it's really light that creates heat. If you're doing it slower because you're going around a corner, because you're using both axes at the same time, you're going to end up with, even if you set your min power a little lower to compensate for that, you still might end up with the kerf being completely different.
Right.
On a Glowforge in particular, yes. But even on an industrial laser, you can play with the min and max a bit to get it a little bit closer, but it's never going to be exactly the same as it is on a straightaway.
Right. Right. And so that's why when people say, they ask me, what should my kerf adjustment be? And I go, we're going to have to do some testing.
Which is why you do things like scallops and
Yes.
circles as well as straight things, because that gives you a better handle on, okay, now what the hell just happened here?
Right. And why did it happen? Right.
And why did it happen? Yeah.
I don't
and
know
I think that's I think the biggest thing for people is if once you understand the why
Yes.
stuff happens, it means you have a better handle on what to look for to fix the problem. Doesn't mean you're always going to be able to fix the problem, because there are some times where you just go, holy shit, I can't figure out what the hell's wrong with this thing. Sometimes it's material.
Yep.
Sometimes it's the laser. Sometimes
and kind of
it's
like
humidity.
you said, the more you do something, when you understand it, like for me, I know that everybody asks me about kerf all the time, but for me, when something doesn't fit in a slot, I know exactly what happened because I do it. I understand the concept, right? It's not a mystery to me anymore. And so now I know what to do. And if I make a mistake, I know what I did. I know how I got here because I've done it so many times.
Well, it's kind of like Will and I are both pastry people in our private lives. Him professionally, me not professionally, but it's the same sort of idea. It's like, if you know why something happens, you whip the egg whites too much, or, you're making French macaroons and you overbeat the mixture, too much macronage, and the whole thing deflated. You understand what you might need to do the next time to make it better. I think one of the disadvantages of the Glowforge hiding all that stuff is that if you don't take the time to sort of learn it and figure out what they've hidden, it's a lot harder to understand what the hell am I supposed to do now?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. Hey, Will, you want to catch any of those questions that people have? I know they're a little bit out of order here, but you can throw some of those Cathe's way.
Yeah. Well, one, I just saw that mom with a laser. Emily's part of.
Oh, hi, Emily.
Yeah.
She's
Mom.
The testing queen.
Yeah.
We have a question here from Abby that says, let's see, can I put it up there?
Yeah. Oh, yep.
What is unprinted newspaper?
It is literally unprinted newspaper. So I started out testing my acrylic. I only use it for acrylic. I never use it for wood. And I needed something to absorb the flashback. So when you get those horrible lines on the back of it, whether you've masked it or not, that's it. The honeycomb, usually honeycomb, bouncing off the light beam, bouncing off the honeycomb and hitting the backside of the material. Even if you can get it tuned in so that it's almost perfect, sometimes getting it perfect is really hard.
Yeah.
So I started out, and when I thought, I wonder if I put newspaper under it. Well, I'd already cut paper by that point, so I kind of knew it wasn't going to burn up. And so I started with just regular newspaper. And then I thought, and it worked. And I thought, well, I don't really want to use regular newspaper because the stuff's just, too messy. So I bought a huge box of it off of Amazon. And then I inherited a box of packing paper from somebody local who was packing their house and they didn't need the rest of it. And it's essentially unprinted newspaper. So I use usually 2 sheets underneath my acrylic, sometimes 4, depends on what the acrylic is. And it helps absorb that heat from the flashback, and it prevents it from reaching the backside of the acrylic. So again, it kind of gets into if you've got your settings close, but not quite. If they're too far apart, you're still going to end up with flashback. And the unprinted newspaper will absorb some of it. But the closer you get the settings dialed in, the better it works.
That's great.
Yeah, that's the first I've heard. I've heard the wet paper towel. I've heard, lifting it off of the bed. But that's great.
I've used all of those. The problem with the wet paper towel method for me is that if I'm particularly now that I have bigger lasers and I'm doing a 19 by 24 inch sheet rather than a Glowforge size sheet, is it's a shitload of wet paper
Wet
towels
paper
to
towel.
put on the top of my
Yeah.
thing, on the top of the honeycomb. So I just found that this worked better. Plus, it does in fact cut through it, but then I just pick the stuff up and it usually comes right off. And I don't always mask the back of it. Sometimes I leave the mask on. It kind of depends on what I'm doing. But if I'm also going to flip something over because it's a solid acrylic like these guys, and I need to be able to score something on the back, because on most of the stuff I do, I put TFQ for the Floss Queen, which is what I sell my stuff under. Then I need to be able to flip it. And so I don't want to have to keep peeling all those pieces. So I take the entire top and the bottom off at the same time. And then I use Dawn usually on the surface and then unprinted newspaper underneath.
You read my mind. I was going to say, let's talk more about acrylic. And why don't you, for people who have never done that, talk them through a little bit of the Dawn. How do you mix it? How do you apply that? How does that work?
Well, so really what you're after is some sort of surfactant that will absorb and it's not really for the cutting, it's really for engraving, that will absorb that debris that gets blown by the fact that the laser is actually engraving something. And it's a super fine dust. It's finer than what you get when you're engraving wood. So if you don't do that, you end up a lot of times with that sort of cloudy mess that's right near the edge of whatever the thing is, of whatever you've engraved. And sometimes it won't come off. I can usually get it off with denatured alcohol. Don't use isopropyl alcohol on acrylic. It can cause it to craze, which means it eventually can cause it to crack. I've not had that problem with denatured alcohol.
Okay.
I've even soaked stuff in the denatured alcohol and not had it eat it. So I think for me, it's worked okay. But having the Dawn on it, you could use something else other than that. Dawn, I think, works well because it's a fairly viscous soap, and it doesn't have a lot of other stuff in it.
Yeah,
which is an advantage in this case. So I actually take go to the dollar store or wherever it is, get one of the little bottles of the Dawn, the blue stuff. I use the blue one, and then I put it in a sprayer, add about maybe 10% water to it, just enough so that I can spray it. And then I literally lay my sheet. Well, in the Glowforge, I do this not in the laser because it's a little easier. The bed's bigger. I can keep it away from the optics. I just spray it on, and I happen to use a piece of wool felt. So I cut a lot of wool felt for some of the products that I make, since a lot of what I do is needlework related. So I've got tons of scrap pieces of wool felt. And so I just keep all my little scrap pieces and I spray it on, and then I just smush it all over, and I don't even wait for it to dry. I just do it as is. It will sometimes if I've done it and then I come back 2 hours later, obviously it will have dried, which doesn't really matter. No, the down power wash doesn't work.
Okay.
And the reason it doesn't work is because the power wash isn't viscous enough.
Okay.
It's great for cleaning, but it is not good for doing this particular method. You actually need the viscosity of something like a regular soap.
Now, Mandy's got a question, and I think this is good when you're just understanding what you're talking about. I think this is a worthwhile question. She says it's a silly question. I don't think it is a silly question. If she's already masked on both sides of the acrylic, can I wipe Dawn on top of the masking? If you could kind of talk about that and why that's not good and what's happening there.
Well, so the fact that you've already got masking on the top of it, that means you don't need to use the Dawn. So the Dawn really is to take the place of masking. So masking is what will grab those extra debris. Okay. And so when you peel the masking off, it's going to come off with it. But if you're doing super fine engraves, where you've got a whole lot of little detail lines, having the masking on it can actually create a problem because it might not let the engraving be quite as fine as you want it to be. So taking the masking off and using the Dawn takes the place of actually having to use the masking. But if you like using the masking, because for some stuff I still leave the masking on. If I'm not going to do a bunch of engraving, I will sometimes just leave the masking on and cut it. And then I will cut my blanks, and then later I have a whole pile of things, and then later I'll go and add whatever it is I need to them.
I think this is a great question too. Do you leave Dawn on your acrylic between uses?
I do.
And she
I
said, I
do.
left some on mirrored acrylic for a couple of weeks and it seemed to have dissolved a little of the mirror back in a bit. What are your thoughts there?
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it ahead of time on something like the mirror stuff.
Okay.
Because it can eat into the coating. If you're just using cast acrylic, which is 98% of what I use, I've come back to it after even a couple of months. I have a piece left over. I used half of it and now I've come back to the sheet. And it works fine. But for stuff like the mirrored stuff, that stuff's got a whole different characteristic to it. So you have to be more careful. That I would, if I'm not cutting a whole sheet of it, I would just kind of block off the section and just smear it in that section so that I know where it is I want it. And I will sometimes actually write on my acrylic before I stick it in the laser. Because if you use a dry, either a dry erase marker or even a permanent marker will come off with denatured alcohol. A dry erase one will just come off by
In fact, on that note,
so you could kind of highlight where you want to put the soap.
Mm-hmm. I use a dry erase marker right on the lid of all my lasers when I'm writing notes to myself.
Oh, I haven't tried that.
I do it all the time. Like if I need to write settings or whatever I'm doing, I'll just write it on there. And in fact, I was training a couple new people in my office, and I wrote some things kind of on the Mira 9 since the lid's so big. I wrote some on the back portion so it's not right in the front. And we had for a couple of weeks, we had reminders just written on the lid, and then eventually we just wiped it off.
That's a great idea.
Hey, I wanted to say to Mandy, Mandy, you said you just went through and masked everything. That's okay. That is totally okay. Absolutely. These are great questions. Christy, is there a way to have more I love that I did not pay her to ask this, but I love this because I was going to try to find a segue into this from our conversation earlier. So here's a softball to you.
What laser do you have?
Yeah, Christy, what laser
I'll
do you
answer
have?
the question in general, but also tell me what laser you have.
Okay.
So for most of us, I think we think, well, okay, I should go the fastest conceivably possible because A, that's going to save me time, B, whatever. For acrylic, that's actually the opposite. You want to go slow and low. It's kind of like barbecue. Yeah. Think of acrylic as barbecue. Because what you want is to get the smoothest edge, the acrylic needs to stay kind of slightly melty. If it cools too fast, so I was telling Mark earlier today when we were talking, it's like get back to why I'm in a number of Facebook groups. Someone in one of the Thunder groups a few months ago had posted a picture of their first test with acrylic, and they had turned the air compressor on their Thunder and had it at 35 PSI or something. And they were just completely baffled as to why it looked like a zipper on the edge. I don't mean just a really sort of slight zippery thing. This was serious zipperiness. And everybody said, turn the air compressor off. And they did, and they posted the next picture, and it was almost completely smooth. So what happens is that for acrylic, if you cool it too fast while it's cutting, it won't stay melty enough to get that smooth edge. So this gets into like a lot of things. There's a Goldilocks point, which Mark likes that I use that term.
I do.
Where you have to find the balance of power and speed to be able to get, specifically for acrylic, to be able to get the smoothest edge possible. So a glow forge is usually really great at acrylic because it's a slow laser. Even if you're going as fast as possible, it's still way slower than most of the industrial lasers. But even on a glow forge, I don't go super fast. It's like there's a fine line between, I want it a reasonable speed because I don't want to take forever, but I also don't want to go, if I go too fast, I have to use more power.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. So, sometimes you have to sort of balance those two to be able to get it right. But if you want to go low and slow to be able to get the smoothest acrylic edge possible. And it does take quite a bit of testing. And it's like, so this is only 5 on my little ring here. This ring has I think a dozen. And then this ring has this is a different acrylic, has another dozen. And the other thing you need to know is every manufacturer of acrylic, every color of acrylic can be very different. So if you think, I can cut it all on, proof grade black, or, I use the settings in my Eon, my Mira, my OM Tech, whatever, and I do them all the same. You might find that if you make a minor adjustment, you'll get a much cleaner cut on some acrylics. It's like a recipe. So if Will and I both made, I love French macaroons. I know Will does too. Will and I both made French macaroons. They would not turn out the same. Even if we used identical ingredients, exactly the same measurements, they would turn out the same. That's what happens with acrylic. So you can get clear acrylic. You think, oh yeah, it's just clear acrylic. It's 1/8 inch. It's all the same. No, it's not. It depends on who made it. It depends on what factory they made it in. It depends on how level they got it, because cast acrylic is not a uniform thickness. It doesn't usually go off by too much, but it can be off from edge to edge or even in the middle. So a lot of times people cut something and they're like, well, but I cut it in this this part of the thing and it cut fine, but over here it's not cutting. It's because it's probably not the same thickness.
Yeah.
So acrylic tends to be a lot trickier than wood, just because it has some different characteristics that make it a bit more, it needs a bit more of a nuanced approach.
Right.
I have a question for you too. So I'm backtracking when it comes to testing a little for some of the newer users. We've done this for a while, so we kind of know our materials. But even as someone who's been doing it for a while, how often do you test materials when you get them in, or how often do you test the same material that you get in?
I do.
Today versus 6 months from now?
Yeah, I do. I will many times caliper my, so if for those of you who've never bought a set of calipers, go buy a set of calipers.
Yes.
They're not super expensive. It's a really good, precise way of being able to measure how thick a material is. I use everything in millimeters, even though my brain still thinks in inches. Yeah. My laser part of my brain thinks in millimeters. So it's kind of like this got divided math up in my head. And I just find that if I don't test and I make the assumption that it's going to work the same, that it almost never does. Nope. So I've learned if I've gotten a new shipment, I get a lot of my acrylic from Amanda at Cerulean Tides. I'm one of her really early customers. And if I get a new batch of, say, the green glass acrylic, the frosted stuff that I really like to use, I will caliper it, and then I will go and just make a quick test in the corner to make sure that my settings are still working. Because the thickness might be slightly different. The recipe from the manufacturer might have been just a tiny bit different. Yeah. My laser might not be the same cleanliness that it was when I cut the piece 2 months ago. All of those things are factors in there. I think we just kind of assume, well, you just throw it in and you go, and it's like, nah, it's a little bit more variables in there. How much material do I go through when I'm testing? It kind of depends on if I'm starting from scratch or not. So if I'm starting from scratch and I've never used a material before, I can go through a half a Glowforge size piece pretty easily. And that's because, as you can tell from my little rings here, I do a lot of little pieces. So
do you have a file that you load over and over? Is that what you have?
Yeah, I have a testing file, and then I just change the settings. And I don't do a bunch of cuts at the same time. I actually do them one at a time. And it takes longer to do that, but it gives me the opportunity to go and look at it. I look at it, I feel it. It's like, can I feel the zipper? Because you can tell when it's really smooth. The micro serrations aren't there.
Yeah.
If it's super smooth, if it's reasonably smooth, there'll still be some micro serrations. If it's super smooth, you won't feel them at all. And so I like doing them one at a time, because then I can, look at it, feel it. It's kind of like touch it, sniff it kind of thing.
Yeah.
And go, yeah, it's not quite right. So I think I need to tweak this. And I only ever change one thing at a time. So I only ever change either the power or the focus or the speed or the min and the max, and in power, in this case, in my industrial laser, I don't change both min and max at the same time usually. Because then that way I know what the effect was. And the reason I keep all of these because all of these are from one test run. But the reason I keep all of them and every single one of them is marked is I might want to go back to this 6 months from now and go, okay, I got a new batch. It kind of didn't work the same. I wonder if this other setting I tried for this might work better, because it gives me a better feel for what worked, what didn't. I even keep sometimes the ones that just look really super crappy, because it kind of gives me a better feel for what am I supposed to do with this, you know, when the next material comes. And the other thing, and the other thing about plywood is plywood's different too, because plywood is a sandwich. You know, it's like you make your sandwich, you go to the grocery store, you buy bread, you buy sandwich bread. Trust me, it's not exactly the same thickness. So you make a ham and cheese sandwich on Monday and you make that same ham and cheese sandwich on Friday, and it's not going to be exactly the same.
Right.
So, you know, if I'm getting new wood in, I will double check it just to make sure that that what I think the settings are don't have to be tweaked some tiny bit.
I think that's an important lesson for all of us, right? We've been using the same materials. I get all my materials from pretty much the same suppliers, but I still go through the testing every time I get a new batch, because one, I want to optimize my settings, like Cathe says, right? And I don't want the frustration of, okay, I just throw in a piece of acrylic or I throw in a piece of wood and I have this 30-minute engrave and a 7-minute cut, and now I've wasted an entire sheet.
Yeah.
Frustration. I'm trying to X-Acto knife the back of it, or I'm sanding the back of it, where I took a little bit of time.
Yep.
I took a little bit of material, sacrificed that, put that as part of my material cost in whatever products I'm going to be selling, factored that in. Yep. And now I know I'm going to get more consistent results with my end product, which is going to end up saving me time and money in the long run. You know,
and I even do the same thing like with tumblers in my bigger lasers. It's like I have a couple of, when I get them in, because every color sometimes engraves slightly different.
They do.
The coatings on them are slightly different. So I buy a lot of them from Save a Cup, but not all the colors engrave exactly the same. But I usually keep a particular one of 2 or 3 colors that's my test one, and I just write what it is. And then I can kind of fine tune it on that one so that, oh yeah, this needs to be a little different, because somehow the red doesn't engrave quite the same as the teal one, or the black and the silver always seems to engrave differently than everything else.
For me, my nemesis is blue. For whatever reason, the blue.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but they don't engrave nearly as nicely. Let me. Here's a question that you did talk about earlier, but I think it's worth repeating. Do you test circles or squares, or does it matter? I know you touched on that earlier, but it doesn't hurt to repeat it again real quick.
I do actually. So my test file contains a circle, a square, and a scallop.
Okay.
So circle, and usually
scallops.
This is a little bigger, but usually I use a 1-inch one.
Okay.
I use a square, and I use scallops because they show different things. Circles show XY movement at the same time. Squares show X or Y, and then scallops show the curve of the circle, but it also gets you that interior point where if you're working on an acrylic in particular, some of the lighter color acrylics will have a tendency to overburn at that point, because the laser spends a little more time there before it changes direction.
Love it. That's so good. Good question here. I think it's a great question. Is it bad that I cut everything on full power on my Glowforge? Or let's extend that to anything.
Yeah, let's go say, I would say not that it's bad. I would say that it's not optimal.
Okay.
I would say that what you want to do is maximize speed and power. So if you're doing it for wood, you're probably fine. If you're doing it for acrylic, that's probably not ideal. You might want to slow it down and reduce the speed so that you get a bit more of that meltiness to get the edge smooth.
Well, in fact,
it's part of what you test.
I typed this quote out from you, so I'm going to put it on the screen, and I want you to talk about this, but get a drink first. Cathe said earlier, she said, when I find a setting that works, I don't usually stop there. Talk about that, because I think that was rich. I mean, really good stuff.
Part of it is that once you hit a point where you know it works, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the best setting. It just means you reached a setting that worked. So I like to go sort of on either side of that to determine, is there a better setting? And if I'm going to spend, 2 or 3 hours testing something, an extra 15 minutes to get that really fine tuned is worth the time for me. And it might also help me in, I get a new batch in and it doesn't quite work, then I can go back to those tests and go, okay, well, if I did it this, maybe that will make that effect. So I tend to, like on a Glowforge, if I'm doing testing, like I said, I will only change one thing at a time, the power or the speed, but not both. So for like power, I will increment it or decrement it by like 5.
Okay.
And even with this, and even with the speed, I usually use increments of 5. It's enough of a jump I can usually see what the effect is.
Yeah.
And if I found that, it works at 155, 85% power, then my question is, well, does it work at 155, 82% power or 80% power? And it might still work.
Yeah. Now,
and it might be that it gets you that it might still get you a cleaner cut.
That you got me. That's what I was going to say. I was going to ask the question of what's the advantage of going with lower power if it still works, and the advantage is a cleaner cut, less burn, less char.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, anytime you can lower the power, unless you're going super, super fast, is usually better. Well, it helps with the lifespan of most CO2 glass tubes. It doesn't really matter for RF tubes because those are a whole different technology. But usually you want to, you just kind of want to get it so that you've got it, like I said, the balance between speed and power. And so, yeah, you can cut it on the most power and run it as fast as possible. But then if you back the power off and change the speed down, you might discover that you get a much nicer cut or a much nicer engrave, whatever it is you're doing, than where you started out. It's anytime you get settings, whether it's one of us recommends something, or whether or not it's Glowforge, or whether or not it's your laser manufacturer, it's a place to start.
Yeah.
It's not the gospel.
Yeah.
It's a place to say, okay, well, somebody else tried this. It worked for them with this kind of material. Because again, it gets back to what was the material.
Yep.
Will and I can. So if Will and I, so you both have Mira 9s, correct?
Yeah.
Right. So if we sent you the exact same piece of acrylic, divided it in half, sent half to you, Mark, and half to Will, if you two started with the same settings, they will not turn out the same because every laser is different. Every tube is tuned slightly differently. So it's kind of like, they say miles per hour, your mileage may vary.
Yeah.
So I had my Mira 7 replaced last year. I had a serious enough problem that they decided to swap my machine out. I had to redo all my tests.
Ooh.
I had to redo everything because it was different. It was still a 60-watt tube. It was still a Mira 7, but the mechanics of the belts had changed. The mechanics of the motors had changed slightly. All of those things had changed. So even though it was, quote, the same laser, it really wasn't. So that's why it's a place to start. It's not the end all and be all.
Yeah, I think like the way that I try to tell myself that helps me like kind of get a grasp of everything when I think about testing and settings is there's a setting that works and there's an optimal setting. So yeah. I get a setting that might have worked, but I fine tune it to get the results that I'm looking for. And that comes with dialing it back, dialing it up each way. So that's how I kind of tell myself, like, yeah, I could cut it here, but if I dial it back a little, it works better. And then I find what works ideally for the effect that I'm looking for.
And particularly when you're doing stuff like, you might be having an issue with flashback. It's like if you've got an issue with flashback, changing how much power you're applying to it and lowering the speed might eliminate it. It's kind of a similar effect in terms of what you're cutting, but it might reduce the problem.
Yep. And here, I got a couple questions for you from some people, Cathe. Let me get this on the screen from Elizabeth. Do you use a spreadsheet or other tool to keep record of your test cuts?
Well, for my industrial laser, I actually keep all my settings, my final settings, I keep in Lightburn. For my Glowforge and for the Gwiki, I just write them on notepads and then I take pictures of them because then I don't lose them. I waylaid my notepad for about 3 months once for one particular material, and I could not figure out where the hell I had put it. And I eventually found it and went, okay, I'm just taking pictures of everything from now on. But part of the reason that I do that is because since I write the settings on these guys,
Yep.
I don't actually need to go and do that. I don't need to go and keep a huge spreadsheet for it. But I do have I start out with just a little small yellow lined rule, and I will write, speed, power, all of that stuff. And then my notes are things like, too many microfractures, too much flashback, all of those things. And then kind of get it down to the point where I have found it. And then I circle it. And then I just take a picture of it, because then I always have it. But yes, I could be more organized and put it in a spreadsheet, but my life's too short.
Yeah, I'm horrible at that too. I have a notepad that I keep all of my stuff in as well. It's Post-it notes next to the laser, writing it on that, and then I'm sticking them in my notebook. And at some point, I usually write it down in the notebook.
But I like Mark's idea about just writing it on the top of the laser while you're doing it, and then write it down.
Yes. I've taken pictures of the lid of my laser several times,
So same concept.
Yeah.
We got a question here from Orchard Valley Laser Design. I might have missed this. LPI. What is LPI?
Talk about that. So if you're doing engraving, LPI is like dots per inch on a printer. So if you're doing something, the denser the LPI, the more dots there are in what it's trying to engrave. So if you're getting a really grainy look on an engrave, sometimes increasing the LPI can make a difference. Sometimes defocusing the laser can make a difference. We'll talk about that. If it's a raster file, which would be like a PNG or a JPEG or something like that, that's a little bit more difficult because it already started out with some LPI, and you can change it, but it doesn't necessarily help a lot. With vector stuff, it can make a huge difference. So if you're doing a really super fine engrave that's got a lot of detail to it, doing an LPI of the equivalent of 300 or 400 can make it come out clearer than if you use, say, 150. So on a Glowforge, that's the other thing I will test when I'm doing engraves is the focus and the LPI, so that I can tell like what's it going to do with that particular material, particularly with acrylic.
That's great.
But I did want to talk a moment about defocusing.
Do it.
Because we didn't touch on that earlier. So focus is the other part of the equation in all of this. More so for engraving, somewhat for cutting, but mostly for engraving. So when the beam, if you're focused on the top of the material, so on a Glowforge using the camera system, you tell it where you want it to do set focus. I always use set focus on my Glowforge. Always.
Yep.
It's like I put the material in the bed, I place my artwork, I figure out where I want it to do set focus, I do set focus, and then I decide whether or not I need to shift the image of whatever it is that I'm doing. Because then it has done, it's like a sonar kind of thing, only it actually uses light. It uses light to determine where the top of the material is. So if you're using clear acrylic, the trick is put a piece of blue painter's tape where you want to do your set focus. If you're using glass, so like I do Will sells these guys, the K9 crystals. You can't focus on that.
Right.
Because the beam will bounce right through it. So I stick a piece of blue painter's tape in the middle of it because I almost always focus in the middle. And then once I get it where I want it to go, then I just leave it on there. Actually, in this case, for this stuff, I'll have to show you guys a picture, but I did one where I did one without any masking on it, and I did one with masking on it. And it turned a different color. The glue in the adhesive changed the color of my engrave. It actually made it more pronounced, which I thought was just amazing. It's like wouldn't have thought it would do that, but there was just enough heat to do that. I don't worry about it for anything else, but for glass, it actually can be a feature versus a bug. So, but if you're using something that's clear and it's really hard to get it to focus, other laser systems like a lot of the industrial lasers use a pressure point to be able to do the set focus. So if you're doing, they work usually with some pin system or the cone or something that you set autofocus, it goes down, and then it knows how to back off what it believes the focus is if you're doing it automated. But with the Glowforge, I always use set focus. And then if I want it to widen that beam, then I change where that focal point is. So instead of it being directly on the surface, I tell it, I move it up slightly so that, and I don't physically move it. I'm telling the software that it's thicker or thinner than it really is. And I want the focus to change because I want it to widen the beam.
Right.
And that's, again, one of those things where you play with it. So like in my engraved tests, which are on this one, so this is part of what's written on this. So this is called a cipher. It's my first initial and my last initial intertwined in each other. It's one of the things I usually use to test for engraves with. How it looks will be dependent on where my focal length is. So like for this one, I lowered the bed of my mirror by 3 millimeters. You can achieve the same effect on Glowforge by just changing where you tell it to focus it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well,
so it's another factor in things. You don't really, for Glowforge in particular, you don't really want to do that for cutting. It creates a whole other set of problems.
Yes.
An industrial laser, if you change the focal length for cutting for a thick material, it can actually improve the cut, but that's really kind of more of a function of higher wattage things. And I mean, I guess in theory you could actually do it with a Glowforge, but I'm not sure how much of an effect it would have.
Right.
But I use it a lot for engraving.
So
Perfect.
good.
Yeah, and a lot of good information.
I got to tell you, I mean, Cathe, we've done a lot of these, and people are still just rocking the questions for you. So if you've got a little more energy, let's keep it going.
I'm good. I'm fine.
I know that Will has to go to bed
before.
Will has to go to bed soon because he's old, but we'll keep going here.
No, Mark, he's not old.
No,
I think in this crowd, I'm the old one.
Well, I know I'm older than him, so that's for sure.
Yeah. So what year were you born?
Me, 69.
Yeah. So I was born in 55.
Okay. So you're just a couple months older than me. That's all
right.
Yeah,
I'm just a couple months older than you. Yeah.
This is the key. This is the amount of children.
Yeah. Okay. You are. Okay. Yeah. You are old.
I'm old. I'm the oldest.
Yep.
They age you real quick.
I have zip, so.
Do I get to count my puppies that I have now? Because they're wearing me thin, man.
I think maybe.
But yes.
Yeah, so we got a question here from Robin, too. She was talking about, I'm getting ready to try to make pins out of acrylic. Can you talk a little bit about tips for using weld-on?
Weld-on is really tricky because you've got to use a really super fine tipped applicator to get it where you want it, because it's not an adhesive. It's actually a chemical bond.
Chemical, yeah.
And so if you get too much on it, it just creates major havoc. So I would say if you're going to make pins, and if you're making it out of clear acrylic, that would be what you want to use the weld-on for. If you're not making it out of clear acrylic, use something else. If you use one of the super glues, so we're going to use a little CSI language here. So if you're going to use super glue, you have to know that if you've touched your acrylic, this doesn't really do it so much with wood, but if you've touched your acrylic with your fingers, and the oils on your hand get on there, once you put the dab of whatever your super glue is on, because I do this to do magnets on the back of things, you can end up with weird little striations on the back, and that's because, think CSI, when they take the piece of whatever evidence it is and they hung it in something and they fumed it with some sort of super glue, that's exactly what happens. The fumes are attracted by the oil in your fingers. So if you're doing acrylic and it's not clear, I would say use a super glue or some equivalent thereof. I use one of the actually, which one do I use now? I can't remember now. I think it's not, I've used one of the Gorilla ones, but that's not the one I'm currently using. I'm using something else. And I like the gel ones because I can control the
Control it, yeah.
blob
Yep.
more. But for Well-Don, if you're going to use it, try to put it in one of those super fine tipped little tiny containers where you've got basically like a needle nose, or actually use a disposable syringe.
I'll tell you real quick that I bought some more glue for one of the guys that works in my office, and he's used to using gel, and I didn't pay attention. I bought the liquid, and poor guy, I mean, he just opened the thing and just went, and of course he thought it was going to
Yeah.
be gel, and it was not gel.
Yeah.
So he
What do
said,
you
Yeah,
use?
I've never used the Well-Don 3. I've only ever used the 4. So, Danielle Worthington? Trying to think of her name.
Danielle.
One of the
Danielle.
one of the people who's in a number of the laser groups. I can't think of her name right off the top of my head. She has a really great thing on her website about the different glues for lasering, and she talks about, I think, even the Well-Dons in there. So I'll have to give you the link to it because I'm spacing on her last name.
I think it's Danielle Wethington or
Wethington.
Wethington. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah,
she's great, really good.
she's done a lot of testing on it, so she's kind of my go-to person when I'm trying to figure out what I want to try next.
Yeah, so good.
Perfect.
What else you got there, Will?
Let's see. I'm trying to go back on here for some of these.
Oh, this is a great question. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned adjusting power and speed when getting flashbacks. Do I start with lowering the power and increasing speed, or the other way around? Like, what's your thought process on what's the
Depends
first
on the material. It
Okay.
depends. For me, it depends on the material. So if it's wood, I will actually increase the speed. Because for wood, I want it to cut as fast as possible to reduce the amount of char. And so if it's cutting through, but I'm getting too much flashback, then I will keep increasing the speed until it either A, doesn't cut through anymore,
Yeah.
or B, I don't get flashback. One of those two. For acrylic, I do the opposite. I actually adjust the power because usually I don't want as much power so that it's again that sort of balance of meltiness.
Okay.
So I kind of do it two different ways depending on which material I'm doing.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate.
But as long as you're keeping notes about what you did, then you have at least some idea. So if you've decided, okay, well, I'm going to start with speed. So I'm going to increase the speed, and you go, okay, well, that was interesting. I did reduce the flashback, but now it won't cut through.
Right.
Then you either back it back down a little for the speed, or maybe you need to back the speed down a little and back the power down a little, or increase the power a bit.
Yeah.
They kind of move in tandem, but the reason I do them separately is because otherwise I can't tell what it was that caused it.
Right.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, we're right now at about an hour and 10 minutes. I know we want to keep it closer to that.
Okay.
There's questions that we didn't get to. We will go back into
Yep.
The chats and answer as many as you have. So
Yeah.
if you still have questions, feel free to leave some questions there. As you can see, this is a very hot topic. There was a lot of engagement, a lot of people asking questions. And I think having you at the conference here in Sacramento is going to be full of information.
Gold.
Is going to help
Yes.
all of us, right? Even as people.
Well, and I would encourage people who are coming, bring stuff with you.
Yeah.
So if you've got pieces that you've done, particularly if they're portable and you're flying on a plane, you might not want to bring a big cutting board. But if you've got small pieces of things that you're like, okay, I've done this and I don't know why this happened.
Yep.
Bring those with you, because then we can look at them and go, okay, so here's what this means. When I say what's the zipper, when I talk about the zipper effect on the edges of acrylic, if you run your thumbnail down it, it helps if you have a thumbnail. If you run your thumbnail down it and you can hear it and you can feel it, then it's not as smooth as you might want it. How much you can hear it means that you're either you don't have enough power or you're going too fast,
Hmm.
or you have too much air.
So
On a
good.
Glowforge, that's not a problem. That's
No,
the
it's
other
not.
reason actually why Glowforges do really well at acrylic.
Yeah.
Is because they have such wimpy air assist. They can't cool the acrylic fast enough for it to get super, for it to get super cold. That's also one reason why, and I'm going to say this, and then if you want to be done,
Sure.
that's good. If you're using a Glowforge in particular, if you've got a really super dense, packed sheet of acrylic pieces and they're little fiddly bits, don't do them all one color. I never do them in my Glowforges one color because I want it to skip. So like if I've got 40 things on that bed, I might have 4 different colors because I want it to do like here and here and here and here and here, and then come back and do the rest, and then come back and do the rest. Because the acrylic needs a little bit of time to cool in a Glowforge in particular, because if it gets too hot in a Glowforge, it does stand a better chance of actually having a problem.
Wow.
I
That's
don't
so
have that
good.
problem with an industrial laser because it's moving faster even if I'm running it slow. And it also has a whole different idea about how it wants to do stuff, although I can certainly make it do the same thing. I've not run into the same problem doing a big sheet on one of my industrial lasers as I have doing a lot of fiddly bits on a Glowforge.
That's so good.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's one that when we see people who have those very intricate designs and they say, hey, I cut a ton of acrylic and I cut all these fine pieces and, I get excessive burning or melting or the potential of a fire.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people had issues doing the F flakes a couple of years ago, because there were so many fiddly bits in there.
Yeah.
That if you shrunk them down a little, that made the problem
Worse.
even worse. So, on a Glowforge in particular, if you can change the colors so that it doesn't matter for the engraves, it really only matters for the cuts, so that you can actually kind of move it around a bit so that it has a chance to cool in between. I do stuff that's got a bunch of little holes in it because I'm doing what I call thread holders, since I own a needlework store and we put thread in them. And I will, in my Glowforge, my holes are different colors. And so I'll do like every other hole one color and the other hole's a different color so that it has a chance to cool down in between. It does mean that it takes it a little bit longer to do it, but I have found,
but not a lot,
through trial and error, that
right.
I get a better look if I do that.
Man, what a great tip.
In my Glowforge.
I may want to have to go back and watch all this and just write this down and say, top 10 tips from Cathe, because these are great. I hope you guys have been taking notes. If not, come back and write some stuff down. You can watch this 24/7 anytime you want. We've got this live on 5 different places right now, including YouTube. So it's a lot of places. So make sure you take some notes. And on that note, Will's going to spin the wheel. Tell them what we're doing today and why we're spinning it.
Yes, so everyone who's already purchased a ticket to the conference here in Sacramento, every time we do one of these lives, we're going to spin the wheel and we're going to refund your ticket. So you will get that ticket for free. This is only for the people who have already purchased tickets. We have 4 weeks left until the conference. So get your tickets. We have limited amount of tickets left. We want to be able to get your name into the drawing. You want to be able to get seats at the conference, right? If you found information like this valuable, this is what that 3-day event is going to be. It's just going to be jam-packed with information,
yes.
The ability to learn these in person, to meet Cathe, to meet all the other presenters, to meet like-minded individuals who have the same goals, have the same aspirations, and we all want to kind of learn together. So it's a great opportunity. Not every day you're going to get an opportunity to put a group of these presenters together and be able to pick their brains and get all of this knowledge. So let me go and pull up this. You want to pull it up, Mark, on the screen?
I got it. Here it comes.
I got all the names in here. I'm going to spin it for your.
Yes.
Caroline, congratulations.
Yeah. Very nice.
Congratulations, Caroline.
Yeah, congratulations. So you can message Will, you can message me, it doesn't matter. We'll take care of you and get you all hooked up with that. And we'll look forward to seeing you in Sacramento.
Yeah, it'd be great. So yeah, you got your ticket for free to be able to get all this great information and hang out with everybody. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be not just educational and informational. It's going to be it's going to be an experience. You're going to walk away having a blast.
Well, I think just being able to meet people in person and have one-on-one conversations or small group conversations, I think is really great. Yeah.
In fact, I'll add to that because Will and I were talking a lot today, and we'll continue to work on it all the way up until the event. We're going to try to combine giving everybody a chance to go to all the breakouts and learn from all the instructors. And we would like to create some organic opportunities for people to spend some time together and interact as well. So we're working on those. It's going to be great. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool. We're getting originally we were talking about where we were going to have to put out a schedule for people to pick which classes you were going to take. We have worked the logistics where every class that is offered, everyone will take.
Yeah.
So you will get all the information.
That's great.
You'll walk out of there not worrying I pick this one? Should I have picked this one? Or did I miss something here or miss something there? Right. Every person who comes to the conference will get all the same information across the board, with also the opportunity to have those small breakouts, to have the smaller group connections, to ask questions, and also have panel discussions and have bigger group sessions and talk about just everything that's going on in our laser journey. So
it's gonna be awesome.
And it is a journey. I think that's the point. It's like, no matter whether you've been doing this for 2 weeks or 2 years or 20 years, everybody at some point you still end up learning new stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing it for a while. I took notes.
One of the things that people ask a lot about the conference specifically is they say either I'm a beginner. Is there going to be something for me? Absolutely. In fact, there's one class that I know of that's going to be referred to as 201 instead of 101. And Victor's going to be teaching 101 and 201 of Illustrator. But other than that, everything is good for a beginner as well as someone who's not a beginner. And people also ask, hey, I don't have a Glowforge. Is there going to be someone that can speak to things that matter to me? Well, if you didn't listen today, in fact, Cathe, we'll have to talk about this later. You talked about how to do some notes in Lightburn. There's several things we didn't get to, but I promise you guys, whatever you use, there's going to be some value there. So it's going to be great.
Yeah. Between the group of presenters, I don't think there is a laser out there that one of us have. Right. That could help answer
questions. Pretty much. Yeah. I think we have most of the bases covered.
Yeah. I think so. And the same concepts, right? It could be a Glowforge. It could be a Mira. It could be a Thunder. A lot of the same concepts apply across the board, just executed differently. Right. So, understanding testing helps every laser owner. So,
yeah,
that's awesome. Well, you know what, guys? Thank you so much. We try to keep this as short as we can and yet pack it with information, and we definitely did today. Thank you for coming and joining us. We will hang out and watch the chat throughout the evening if we have an opportunity. I know a lot of people need to go get some food. I need to eat, and I'm old, so I need to go to bed. Seriously, I'm pathetic. My wife is out of town, and so I'm just pitiful. I don't know where the food is. I don't know where anything's at. So I've been married 30 years. I'm pitiful, and I know it. It's okay. But everybody, thank you for hanging out with us. It's been a real pleasure. Cathe, thank you so much for the honor of being with us tonight and also at the conference. The rest of you guys, we're just going to say bye to you. Cathe, stay on for a minute. We'll say bye to you off air here. And everybody, thanks for hanging out with us.
Bye, everybody. I hope to see a bunch of you in Sacramento.
Yep. Have a good night. Bye.